Hello, everybody, and welcome to day 2 of Keto Salt Lake. We've got Keto Conduct is here today, Roy and his lovely wife. They will be our MCs for the day, and now I'm going to go have fun with the camera.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Once again, my name is Roy Ross, and this is my wife.
I'm Sandra.
And we are Keto Conduct. You're supposed to clap now. Supposed to clap.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so our first speaker today has been researching the root cause of modern chronic disease since 2012, and with a focus on cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and obesity. He's been all around the world sharing his research, but most recently, he was at the Irish National Institute of Preventative Cardiology conference going toe-to-toe with 4 professors of medicine and nutrition defending our low-carb lifestyle. So, ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Ivor Cummins.
Thanks so much, guys. So I'm going to start off with a little personal story, and then we'll go through quite a bit of diverse material. So we'll see how it goes. So I sat with my father as he died at 2:30 a.m. in a nursing home some years ago. And his breathing suddenly got really rapid, and then just as suddenly it stopped. So he was out of breath and he was out of time. And he was only 72 years old. But his decline had started many years before that. He had vascular dementia in his early 60s. His quality of life plummeted, really, and then that was followed by heart attacks and his eventual demise. So not a good way to go. And one thing that was really impacted was his health span, right? His lifespan obviously was affected, but his health span of his final decades was very impacted. So we'll talk a bit about that. This is the mortality curve for 1925, and you can see that, around half the people got to their 70s, which wasn't bad for those times. Here's one around 2010, and obviously there's been an improvement in lifespan. But note that infant mortality eradication has made a huge contribution to that change, right? So it's not all meds and things. And also the push out of the curve out here, the cessation in smoking, the elimination of TB and many other communicable diseases, and nutrition played a big part in increasing people's health over the century. And of course, there's medical procedures advanced, and to a certain extent, meds for chronic disease have helped, but maybe not as much as we're led to believe. So that's lifespan average, but it's my belief that if you make all the right nutritional and lifestyle choices, you can push your lifespan out towards the green curve, right? So the smartest people with the best knowledge who apply it most successfully. And if you make the wrong choices, maybe inadvertently, you don't realize you're making the wrong choices when you're guzzling that food pyramid, right? You can pull yourself back towards the red line. But that's lifespan. So let's look at health span, or quality adjusted life years. And this is how long do you live while remaining vital, healthy, and engaging in life, right? Rather than being on meds or in a wheelchair or having issues that impact your life badly, like diabetes, other things. And if we keep in mind that we spend the first part of our life generally busting our ass, right, to build money and resources for our retirement so we can enjoy that rich later life when we have all the experience and knowledge. And there's a lot to play for out here in this zone between the red and the green lines. So there's sport, there's holidays for healthy people, meeting friends, watching the grandchildren grow up and being part of their development. So this is huge value time to play for. Smart cookies like Dave Feldman, I have no doubt will get up to, the upper line, because they have a lot of knowledge and they know what they're doing. My own father, not so much, because although he was a super smart man, he was lacking in any of the knowledge that we talk about and what drives disease and how to avoid it. He would have been a big food pyramid person, essentially. One key point, genetics loads the gun, but it's your lifestyle and nutrition that pulls the trigger. So we have many people with good genetics who've thrown it all away with a poor lifestyle and nutritional inputs, And we have many people with bad genetics who make all the right choices and live long and strong. So genetics is only really a thing for a rare group of people who have severe genetic problems. Mostly it's in your hands what you do with your genes. So what's the biggest issue that impacts us over life in terms of taking away those later years? And it's atherosclerosis. And it's the inflammatory disease of the inner wall of your artery. So on the left, we got a young guy here, and the inner wall of the artery is clean, healthy blood vessels. An average middle-aged office worker in this age will have the beginnings of atheroma, or pustules or boils on the inner wall of the artery. And this is an inflammatory disease primarily caused by insults your body takes from the environment. With time, if you keep pushing this disease process, calcium will be brought in to strengthen, sorry, mixing up the buttons here. Calcium will be brought in to strengthen these atheroma, and it's your body's attempt to stop them killing you when they burst, right? And it can be pretty successful. But if you keep pushing the process, you'll get more vulnerable plaque, the calcium won't keep up, and you'll get ruptures and breakouts. And your doctor may think you're perfectly healthy because he can't see inside your body, and neither can you. But keep pushing the process and you'll hit the end game. A big breakout, a blood flow blockage, and a heart attack. And 30–40% of people don't get up from their first one, right? It's fatal. But what if these people could go back maybe 10 or 20 years, magically, and they can actually look inside their body and see they had highly dangerous levels of calcium building up? And they could explore and find the root cause fixes, as many of us have done, and actually intervene and stop this process. Then they would achieve stabilization. The calcium score they had wouldn't go down, the calcium would stay, but they would have stable arteries, and as a result, they would have a drastically lower chance of a fatal cardiac event. They would effectively have saved their own lives. Only if they did this. If they rolled along like most people, they go to endgame. So why do all US presidents and astronauts have to get their calcification score, the CAC score? And I'll show you the reason here. All the human studies say the same thing. Here we have people of all different age groups, right? And we have calcium score, and we'll show you. People with a low calcium score or zero calcium score have an extremely low risk in the next 10 years of a heart attack. Whether they're 50 or 80 doesn't make any difference. It's the calcium that tells you. Even though age is the biggest risk factor, as Dave went through yesterday, it becomes defunct when you do a calcium score for heart attacks. Middle scoring people have a higher risk, much higher, maybe 5 to 10 times higher, regardless of age. And high scoring people have a 20 to 25 times higher risk of a heart attack in the next 10 years, regardless of age. So I'll emphasize that for you. A 50-year-old with a high score has a massively higher risk of a heart attack in the next 10 years than an 80-year-old with a zero score, right? And this is from the Mayo Clinic study, and it's one of the only of its type. My sponsor, David Bobbitt, got a very high score at the age of 51, and he knew nothing about heart disease, and he was passing treadmills, top 10% of fitness for his age. His doctor said he was bulletproof. He was running 4 times a week, super slim, non-smoker, and eating a whole lot of healthy carbohydrate. Yeah. But he went when he got this score, and he became enraged, and he's not a guy you want to mess with, believe me. He runs a $600 million business, which he also owns, right? And he built it himself. So he found out about the calcium scan, realized there were millions of people who could save their lives like he went on to do, and it was not being given. Cardiology holds it back from people, and that made him really enraged. So he put his money where his mouth is. He set up Irish Heart Disease Awareness, who I work for now, and put several $1 million into projects to get the message out of what I'm telling you today. So why is knowing your score so important, right? We say in engineering, if you don't measure it, it don't get fixed, and it applies here big time. The wonders of achieving stabilization. I showed you stabilization on the graph. Well, in this study, and there are many like it, when you get people with a super high score, obviously have a massive potential risk in the future, they track the ones that increase their calcium more than 15% per year over 5 years. So they were rapid progressors. And their outcome in terms of heart attack was 50% had heart events. Now that's double barrel shotgun, pull one trigger. It's worse than Russian roulette. So a high score that keeps advancing is really, really bad. In contrast, in the same study, the people who had the same high score at the start with huge potential risk, but their calcification was less than 15% per year, maybe 5 or 6%. They stabilized the disease, right? They had a 3% heart event rate, okay? 17 times less as it happens. And in general, these studies show 6 to 8 times lower for a slow calcifier. And you can achieve slow calcification. You just need to know what to do. So this is huge. So saving the masses. Some of you may know this guy, Donal O'Neill, who made the Serial Killers movies. He's a great guy. And they say the Irish are cheap, but he wasn't cheap for us because we paid him to produce a documentary and a movie. The documentary is free to view. We'll send the link out later, and the movie will be out in 6 months. But it involves the Irish sporting heroes of 1991, big, tough men who are still in pretty good shape. I met them all, and we scanned them all, and that's kind of what the documentary's about. So we got a lot of coverage in the Irish top newspapers, so we're getting out there.
This is a test that every astronaut...
Okay.
This is a test that every astronaut, every US president has. But this is the first GA squad to have it done. We're down in Meath next week, but it's exciting stuff, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I think you are setting the standard and you're breaking new ground here. These guys were the peak of physical fitness. The All-Ireland champions in '81 came up against the Meath team who were known as the hardest men in Ireland and beat them. It could be the norm in 5 years' time.
Well, you look a lot older than you actually are, so some of these boys are getting on a bit too. What do you hope to find in here, Benny?
Well, I hope to find that DJ Kane has a heart. That's the first thing, because it's been missing for quite some time.
I hope you enjoyed the Irish national anthem there. No one stood up though, I noticed. There's no... Yeah, congratulations. Okay, well, we get a bit more serious now.
This is a test that every astronaut...
Gotcha. So anyway, these were all deemed healthy men by their doctors. All of them, right? No worries, no heart concerns, no nothing, by the system. And we did find that a half of them had 0 calcium scores. So the doctors were correct in that instance. But around a quarter of them had significant scores, which require a certain level of change in lifestyle. And around 20% had super high scores and needed immediate follow-up with the medical system and with cardiologists. Because I showed you the curves earlier. These are super high-risk individuals with multi-vessel disease. If you have a high score like that, almost always you will find multiple blocked arteries inside, right? But I met these guys with the high scores, and they're like the guys you saw walking down in that video clip, right? You don't know until you look inside. You might be interested in blood tests, but be very careful with blood tests. Here's their blood risk factors we measured. So total cholesterol, you can see the high scorers over here up to super high. We don't have the 3,000 guy, same story. Their total cholesterol was no different than the people with no disease. No signal, right? Worthless. Their LDL bad cholesterol, no difference. No signal, worthless. HDL good cholesterol, I know low carbers love the high HDL, but in this instance, and often you will see at middle age, no real correlation. And triglycerides, not much good either. The ratio had some utility, but You know, you can't distinguish highly diseased people from 0 score, very low disease. And A1C had a hint about it. So yeah, the higher scores were pushing up towards my diabetic line for HbA1c blood sugar measurement, but still you can see it doesn't discern, right? So be very careful with blood risk factors. Of the foreseeable coronary events in this study, and we've seen this elsewhere, I'm going to show you what happens with the calcium scan. So over half in this study were predicted by the risk factor algorithm or by the calcium scan. In fairness, future heart attacks that occurred that were foreseeable by any method. But over a third were only predicted by the calcium scan result, right? So there's countless middle-aged people out there who have high scores and don't know it. A third of future heart attacks that with a scan could find out and take action, essentially. And I'm going to break out those people, those high-risk, high scorers, most of whom are never scanned, into this red pie here. And this is millions of people. There are countless millions of heart attacks, and a third of them can be predicted by the scan, right? Many of them are actually not obese, they're not smokers. Many of them are thin outside, fat inside, like our football players. They have visceral fat inside and hyperinsulinemia, right? And pseudo-diabetes, right? But they just don't know it. Okay? They'll discover, though, when they get a high score, all these people, if we can scan them, that they've been duped because they'll have done the right things, followed the pyramid, stayed non-obese, didn't smoke, just like David Bobbitt, my sponsor, right? But with a scan, they find out, why did I get huge disease? And they'll ask questions, many of them. When they ask questions, like David, many will discover insulin resistance, low carb, keto, it's all on the web now. Someone with a massive risk is going to get very motivated to find out what the hell is going on. And they'll take action to save themselves. And I think many will become ambassadors with time because there are more of these people out there than there are in the low carb community. And they're all potential converts over to low carb, keto, and all of what we talk about. What's this little slice up here? Well, that's Mr. Smug. And I get messages from guys like this regularly. And they say, but I know about keto now. I've seen the videos. Why would I need CAC? Why should I care about it? And that is a case of I'm all right, Jack, pull up the ladder. I'm okay, screw everyone else. And they miss the entire point. There are millions of people who know nothing about low-carb keto or anything like that and are going to sleepwalk into their own death. And we can do something to save them. So we don't worry about these smug people. You're sorted, right? Knock yourself out, off you go. We're worried about, of all, these people here. The root causes, I often talk a little about root cause, so we'll do a bit of that. So why does progression occur? Primarily. And I have this list, it's not exhaustive, but these are the things that are primarily a problem in root cause of driving, not just atherosclerosis, but most chronic disease. And I won't read through them all. But hyperinsulinemia, insulin resistance, and blood glucose spikes after a meal particularly, they're a big part of the pie, but they're not the whole pie. Why is LDL not on my hot list? Well, I think Dave probably understands, but just to tell you why. I'm a bit of a heretic on LDL. I go against the Church of Cardiology and the Church of Lipidology and the ivory towers. I think many of you may know that. But I went up to them a while back and I said, well, quite provocatively, I said, what if I put a super high LDL guy into your risk algorithms? Should come out as high risk, right? Or what if they come out as low risk? Now, the guys weren't very happy, and this is the kind of response I got. But, being the person I am, I went ahead with my heresy. And I put in a guy with a 190 LDL and a 300 total cholesterol into the world's risk algorithms, the latest ones for deciding whether we medicate you or not. That's what your doctor would think with an LDL like that, right? Let's be most doctors. And in fact, you'd probably get some pretty persuasive arguments before you leave the surgery to take some meds for that high LDL. You might even get to feel like this, okay? But it would be wrong. And the reason it would be wrong is the top world's risk calculators give a low risk for this person way below medication levels, once they have a healthy HDL and a healthy blood pressure, right? Once they don't have other problems, a 190 LDL gives them low risk, using their own calculators. And if you've got a CAC score, which you should, middle-aged, middle-risk person or high LDL person should have, and you have a 0, in the AstroCharm and MESA, which use calcification result, you're ultra-low risk, right? You're down on the floor. And yet many doctors would want to give you meds for that. And that's unethical in my mind. It makes no sense. They don't even use their own risk calculators. So we see this in many studies. Dave showed some, but this one I like. 100,000 men and women followed over 8 years, right? Middle age, perfect cohort. And whether you had a low LDL at the start or a high LDL, very high at the start, there was nearly no difference in cardiovascular outcomes, right? And we see this all the time when you look properly. Trig over HDL, low versus high, now you see a big multiplier in risk, right? And that's because, essentially, trig over HDL is a proxy for insulin resistance, which is a really important thing in heart disease, right? So you see a signal. Looking at some important factors here, in another study, repeat heart attacks in men, middle-aged men. They had a heart attack. Let's look and see what predicts a second heart attack over the next 7 years. Total cholesterol and LDL cholesterol were worthless. They predicted nothing in the second heart attack. High blood pressure doubled your risk of a second heart attack. That's fair enough, because it's a proxy for hyperinsulinemia anyway, okay? And high insulin, was it double, triple, quadruple? What do people think? Guesses? 5 times? Hey, nearly 7 times. And we have many studies. The extreme is a 40 times multiplier for insulin metrics for future risk of death, right, in Reeven's study, but you'll get lower as well. So that's where the game is played. You might ask, but what about the LDL particles, as Dr. Thomas Dayspring would say, the particles? They're the sine qua non of heart disease, vastly more important than the old LDL, the particle number, center of the heart disease universe. Let's look at them. Here we have on the left Western men in MESA study, and you can see that the highest calcifiers, as they head up to their 70s and 80s, get massive calcification up to the 1,000. They are riddled with disease, okay? And in fact, the top 10% of calcifiers account for 40% or more of all heart attacks, right? So this is where it's at. But over here we have CEng men, right? And the Catavans are the same, right? And they get nearly no calcification, right? Right up to their 80s, and they have almost no heart disease. People are always talking about them. So how is that? And you would assume they must have a lower LDL particle count, because that's the sine qua non of heart disease. They must have a lower particle count to get that result. No, they have the same or higher particle count on average as the people over here. So that for a start will tell you something. So what is different about them? Well, I would say what's different is they have very low insulin levels, very low blood glucose levels, they have no diabetic physiology, they have no hypertension, doesn't increase with age, no central obesity, no trophies in there, no autoimmune issues, because cardiovascular disease to an extent is an autoimmune disease. Not a lot of people talk about that. But the big thing is really they have no hyperinsulinemia syndrome, no metabolic syndrome. They're healthy, and they have great omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. They largely meet my list. They do not have these problems, which are the primary issues for cardiovascular disease. So LDL particle physics, so a little bit sciencey here. So I'm going to show you Reason's Swiss cheese model, which I love, from the airline safety industry. And essentially it's that you have an accidental trajectory that could lead to a catastrophic crash. But there are many safety layers in the system which usually will stop the trajectory ever resulting in a crash. But the problem in a crash is all of the safety systems fail in a small way and allow the trajectory through. So this is used for safety, industrial and airline industry. If you just got one safety system in that incident, that crash, right, the crash wouldn't happen. right? So you see the principle of the model and what it tells us. Cardiac disaster is kind of similar. We've got an atherosclerosis trajectory leading to a fatal heart attack, but there are many factors that will decide whether or not that will actually happen, right? Many risk factors, if you will. If you fix one of your risk factors and you're someone who's heading for the wall, it doesn't mean you won't get the heart attack because it's multifactorial, a little different than the airline example, but you'll reduce your risk. But for someone who has high risk, they need to fix multiple factors to be truly safe. I think that's fair to say. They need to fix factors like this, right? The target list. Particle precipitated cardiac disaster. So a high LDL particle count could contribute to a fatal heart attack. It could do. But there'd be multiple other things in your body you'd want to be bad, right? For that to actually get through and be part of the issue. And I have 5 things that are important, but there are many more, okay? So we'll go through those in a little more detail. So first I'll just show you the process, the LDL particle theory. It's the newest cholesterol hypothesis. The old ones are being dumped. And in this one, you've got your LDL particles in your blood, and if you have more, that's a problem. There's your red blood cells, your artery walls. And the theory, the cholesterol hypothesis, is that if you have more particles, they'll tend to drift into your arterial wall, get trapped, get oxidized, and then they'll lead to an inflammatory cascade. And it puts the particles at the center of the heart disease universe, sine qua non. Okay. But what's not discussed are the 5 layers and more. So I'll give you an insight into them. Layer 0 is oxidized LDL, and I call it layer 0 because it's ground zero. If this is true, it changes everything. And basically, it's the oxidizing of your LDL particles in your blood, compromising them and damaging them through what you eat and how you live. And it makes them different than healthy, natural LDLs that are undamaged. Many papers out on this now. Here's one of them. And it shows clearly that oxidized LDL through LOX1 receptor is brought into the wall, monocytes from your immune system get engaged, and this is the problem. And note that this team has said that LDL, undamaged native, is not part of the problem. This is not proven yet, but if it's true, and I think it's true, this is where heart disease resides. And oxidized LDL links to all of the things on my target list. They're the things you want to sort if you want your ox-LDL low. The glycocalyx, an extraordinary structure that grows on all the internal surface of your arteries like a non-stick layer. And it sieves, or it manages the LDL particles and the access of them and other components to your wall. So very important protective function. It's very small and very fine. They only discovered it 30 years ago, so the science is young. But look at this paper. Arterial glycocalyx dysfunction is the first step in the atherothrombotic or atherosclerosis process. The first step. Not LDL at all, but damage to this layer. And I have many papers on this. I studied it. And what will damage your glycocalyx and leave you prone to atherosclerosis? High sugar SAD diets, hypertension, oxidative stress, oxidized LDL, but not native LDL, will damage your glycocalyx. Smoking, of course, and arterial morphology. So certain branch points in your arteries have a thin glycocalyx. And guess what? That's where the atherosclerosis happens. And right beside the big atheroma, there'll be no atheroma in a healthy artery. So there's a lot behind this. How do you keep your glycocalyx healthy? Largely my target list. Take care of that. The endothelial cell is layer 2, and this is a single cell layer that forms a barrier to the inner wall of your artery, right? Crucially important. And it allows particles of LDL across. But let's look at how. And here we have in A, there's an evolutionary design process that takes LDL particles, brings them into the endothelial cell, transports them at huge complexity, and ejects them perfectly on the other side in your arterial wall. Now tell me, did evolution design that process to get that LDL into your wall to make sure you had a heart attack? No. And there are new papers on this all the time. This is new science. This is only discovered recently. There's another way they can get through is paracellular transport, where they can leak between leaky junctions between the cells. That's B there. And this happens when your endothelial cells are under pressure or you're in an inflammatory environment and they are dying quicker and there's a turnover rate and leaky junctions occur. But again, that's not an LDL problem. That's a different problem. These are the papers that suggest what can drive LDL across, and they're all inflammatory agents. I won't read through them, but TNF-alpha, they're all associated with diabetes and inflammatory conditions, not LDL conditions, right? Any insult to the endothelial cells can promote this process. And no guesses, right? Intimately linked to all of these things. It's not the whole list, but it blows away any other single factor that people try to push. We're getting there. Proteoglycans are hair-like structures inside the wall, and they can trap the LDL particles when they come in. And when they get trapped, the particles can oxidize, and then they need to be cleaned up by macrophage, and they make foam cells, and your body needs to clear away that junk. So you'd like to know, am I a person who traps a lot of particles or not? So let's look. These papers show what caused much higher trapping and retention rate in these structures. Blood from heart attack patients, blood from insulin-resistant people, blood from type 2 diabetics. Small, dense, and oxidized LDL associated with diabetes and insulin resistance. Higher ApoC3 content, and you get that generally through getting into diabetic dysfunction, okay? And this mouse experiment, I don't like mouse experiments, but the diabetic type 1 mice with the same cholesterol levels as the healthy controls, the diabetic ones had 8 times more retention of cholesterol in the wall, even though they had the same cholesterol levels. So it shows you there's big factors at play here. But again, they all relate to my target list, mostly. And finally, HDL. The low carbers and keto guys love the high HDL. I have high HDL, I'm invincible. I'm never gonna die, right? Not quite. HDL is important, but I'll show how. Fantastic study done on humans where they measured the health of the HDL particles of a whole load of people, right? In a very exotic test, they found out how healthy they were and how well they could do their function of efflux and removal of cholesterol. They saw that the classic high HDL from your blood test, sure, there were 35% lower heart attacks in people with high HDL over the following 7 or 8 years, because they tracked the people that they tested. But they saw that the people with the healthiest HDL measured in an exotic measurement system had 70% lower heart attacks in the following years. And they had 90% lower stroke rates, right? So the key point here is higher HDL loosely indicates that you've got good, healthy HDL, but it's only a loose correlation. That's why it's not a bad marker, but it's the health of your HDL that really matters. It has important jobs to do, right? Guess what screws up your HDL? Okay, no prizes anymore. That's the way to screw up your HDL in a nutshell, pretty much. So a whole system there I've showed you of complexity, and what does the world do? You know, what does the medical world do? It focuses in one tiny spot that to me isn't even the important one. And I call this lipomyopia. And it's a very prevalent disease, and it's very severe in lipidology circles and in people in cardiology, a super focus on a small piece of the puzzle and exalting it up to being the biggest thing. And I hope I've helped show that it's not. It's a thing. It's not the biggest thing. It's understandable because there are drugs and medications that can lower this number. And there are no drugs or medications to help with any of the rest of the system, right? So of course the system's going to focus on where they can help you in some manner. But even though the drugs reduce heart events, calcification scan is still crucial. And the reason is this recent paper, that people with a high calcification score with big disease, they saw substantial benefit from lipid lowering because it lowers oxidized LDL and other things. They saw a much lower 12-year event rate. The drug helped. Only an associational study, but it helped. But the people with a lower than 100 score, or a 0 particularly, the drug showed 0 benefit over 12 years. And this group with lower scores are a bigger group, and they are all being medicated for nothing. They only get the side effects. They don't even get any of the benefit. So calcification scan is really important before you start taking drugs, and that's enshrined in the latest 2018 AHA guidelines. They finally rolled over and put some of this stuff in there. Media manipulation, and I'm going to give the media a kicking now, and they well deserve it. So we've got a situation for 50 years, and the nutritional and medical community have focused us all on cholesterol, and the media have gone for hook, line, and sinker, right? But what's missing? It's the elephant in the room, right? They're completely missing what's really important, and they're looking at what's essentially a proxy, right? And the irony is, and there are many ironies here, these real causes drive that system into dysfunction that I described to you. And in doing so and making it dysfunctional, they actually gift the cholesterol with an appearance of causality, right? So they boost the cholesterol's name in the game. And the obsession with cholesterol for decades has produced papers like this, constantly attacking low carb, attacking keto, using junk data to say they're dangerous, right? There's a method to this madness. Because, and this is the latest, like, you couldn't make it up. I mean, this apparently was funded from Barilla, a pasta company. So there's complete corruption in this whole sphere. But all of these scary articles, they reach most normal people who don't know what you know, and they have a chilling effect on applying low carb and keto, which is the best intervention to deal with our root causes, right? So this is tragic. These people have a lot to answer for. And in turn, what happens is it de-emphasizes the real root causes, and it focuses everyone back towards cholesterol. So this vicious cycle goes on, and it behooves us to counter this. And hopefully with growing numbers of low-carb, keto, and informed people in the coming decade, we will push back on this lunacy. A compilation of studies showed that 95% of studies that looked at hyperinsulinemia linked it successfully to all these chronic diseases. It's not just cardiovascular disease. 95% of studies that measured hyperinsulinemia, it linked directly to those, right? And we have a situation now with the latest figures that 65% of US adults over 45 are now pre-diabetic or diabetic. Right? Hyperinsulinemic, call it what you want. And probably a lot more if you measure them more carefully. So root cause resolution, a little bit on how we resolve this. And I'll show a few studies that I like. This one from Professor Volek, who's an extraordinary man. And he said, well, when we do look at the data, low-fat interventions address LDL concentration. They lower it a bit. Now, how useful is that? Does this address the key root causes? No, and that's why low fat is broadly worthless. Out of there. Keto and low carb, he pointed out from a compilation of many, many studies, and they're growing, addresses all of these biomarkers. And I won't read them out, but these biomarkers are important. And these do address most of our primary root causes, right? So low carb or keto, it's a no-brainer. If you're going to do an intervention, right, and you have disease or you have a concern, it's not going to be low fat. It's going to be that. The Virta Health, you know about the keto study they did over a year with type 2 diabetics. With keto, they got 94% reduction or elimination of medications and insulin. 60% became non-diabetic. Now, they still have issues, but they were effectively in remission, okay? That's an amazing intervention, keto. That certainly addresses our main problem. And Volek came out with one in March, just a month ago, and they got around 30-something US military guys, and they took half of them randomly, and they gave them a keto diet with no calorie control. They just measured ketones, gave them meals, and made sure they were on keto. What did they get in a very short period of time? 18 pounds, 5% body fat reduction, 43% visceral fat reduction in a scan, right? The dangerous internal organal fat. And they got a 50% increase in their insulin sensitivity, which is one of the biggest games in town. Now that's addressing our primary problem with keto. And the last one is a case history, but there are millions of N=1s going to be coming, and there are some that are published as case histories. This guy is an ApoE4 genotype prone to heart disease and Alzheimer's. He's diabetic, he has brain fog, cognitive problems, and they put him on a keto diet for 3 months. They got a 90% reduction in his insulin resistance, which is his big problem. 55% down in trig over HDL, which is a proxy for insulin resistance I mentioned earlier. 30% down in his A1C, down from 7.8 to 5.5. He became non-diabetic on paper in just a few months. And most pleasingly, he got a 26% boost in the MoCA cognitive validated score for cognitive ability. And that's in only a couple of months. So this is the tip of the iceberg of what's coming. And you see those articles in the media, they are fighting against achieving this. So remember that and fight them. Epilogue, and we're wrapping up. And I think I'm on good time. So we'll go back to our quality adjusted life years, our health span. How do you get from the red up to the green, even if you're only starting doing the right stuff in middle age? And how do you access all that, right? See the grandchildren grow up, be active, play golf, enjoy yourself right up to your 70s and 80s. Well, you take care of that list earlier in life. That's the main thing. If you took care of everything that's on there, you'd be a million miles ahead of your compatriots. No question about it. You do low carb or low carbon fasting is my kind of keto, or ultra low carb to get keto. That kind of intervention with healthy fats. That's a no-brainer. You eliminate vegetable oils, which are highly problematic, industrial foods. Yeah, I always love that picture. Don't know who did it. And eliminate processed foods because they're stuffed with refined carbs, sugars, and vegetable oils. The unholy triad. Processed foods full of it, and it's 80% of your supermarket. You get fish or cod liver oil if you don't like fish for EPA, DHA, and for your omega-3, omega-6 balance. And you eat nutrient-dense foods, and you get magnesium, potassium, K2, and important minerals and vitamins for the human machine to function properly. Well, that's an important step. And you get healthy sun exposure or UV without burning for nitric oxide, vasodilation, vitamin D, and a whole host of health benefits. That's a good thing to do once you don't burn. Exercise is also great for insulin sensitivity, and it also raises beta-hydroxybutyrate, which helps with cognitive function. And keto, of course, is the artillery. For difficult cases, entrenched diabetes, obesity, insulin-resistant obesity, keto is the heavy artillery to bring out and go beyond standard healthy low carb, right? So that's a powerful tool. David Bobbitt discovered only through the calcium scan how all of this works. And I have no doubt he is doing all of what I mentioned there and more, and I have no doubt he will push himself right out and get all of that lifespan back, right? And he is a very angry man now. And 7 years later, he told me the other day, since he discovered this and set up the IHDA, he is still as angry and as passionate about saving people 7 years later. It has not gone down a jot, which is quite fascinating and impressive. And I'm going to leave you with a clip from one of my favorite poems. I'm not sure this will work, but I think of all the people who are dead, the millions dead from heart attacks that could have been prevented by a calcium scan and having knowledge of the fixes, or deferred by 10 or 20 years, and all that they lost. And how would they feel if the dead could talk to us? Would they not expect us to get this information out to save those who go beyond them, who are destined currently for the same fate? Is it not an onus on us, not to just think of our own health, but to try and save all the others? And I think it is. And this poem, although it's a war poem, I think the sentiments in it might resonate with what I just said.
We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ivor. All right, everyone, we're just going to take a few minutes to stretch our legs, buy some cupcakes, and then we'll come back at 8:50.